Hello, this is Marwan Omar. I'm an associate professor of cyber forensics and AI at the Illinois Institute of Technology. Welcome to today's keynote speech on cyber forensics. Let's get started. Okay. This is part of the MPCS conference 2025. The objectives for today's lecture or keynote speech is summarizing the basic principles of computer forensics or cyber forensics, and then summarizing some of the laws regarding computer forensics. Some of the key concepts are chain of custody, basic knowledge of hardware and software and networking, and then we wrap up with some of the laws related to cyber forensics. What is computer forensics or cyber forensics? It's the use of analytical and investigative techniques to identify, collect, examine, and preserve evidence or information that is magnetically stored or encoded. So when we are conducting a forensic investigation, our job is to basically collect data in a forensically sound manner so that we do not break the chain of custody rules and we do not tamper with the evidence so that we can maintain and preserve the integrity of the evidence. That data is usually, or evidence or information is usually magnetically stored. It could be on a USB drive, on a hard drive, SSD, it could be on a laptop, a tablet, smartphone, etc. Okay. The objective is to recover, analyze, and present computer-based material in such a way that it can be used as evidence in a court of law. Again, we have to do all of this in a systematic way where we are following the rules of digital evidence collection. We are maintaining the chain of custody, and we are not breaking any laws while we conduct this investigation. It applies to all domains of a typical IT infrastructure. So the user domain, the workstation domain, the LAN domain, LAN-to-WAN domain, WAN domain, remote access domain, system and application domain. What is computer forensics? Again, these are the 7 domains here as it applies to them. On the left, we have the user domain, and then interfacing with the workstation domain, interfacing with the LAN domain, which includes hardware like the server, the switch, and the hub. Then we have LAN-to-WAN domain, that also includes a router and a firewall. And then we have the WAN domain. And then we have also the remote access domain, where users might remotely access our network via VPN. And then we have the application domain, where we have the application server, mainframe, firewall, and the infrastructure. Using scientific knowledge, it's important to understand and apply scientific methods and processes and have knowledge of the relevant scientific disciplines, including scientific knowledge of the field. It requires a thorough understanding of computer hardware, operating system running on that device. You need to know what operating system is running. Is it Windows, Linux, Mac? Is it an iPhone or an Android phone? May include, again, smartphones and routers. You need to know the ins and outs of other networking devices, like we said, routers, switches, firewalls, etc. At least the basics of computer networks. What this means is that somebody wants to specialize in computer forensics and conduct forensic investigations, they need to have at least a basic understanding of computer networks, meaning they need to have knowledge of a router, a switch, how to configure a router, a firewall, how to configure the rules, and the ports on a firewall, or router, or switch, or IDS. Stay up to date, keep learning what is there, of course. Professional development is a cornerstone of today's professional career. We have to stay up to date by attending conferences, seminars, webinars, etc. All of this is important. How you collect evidence determines if that evidence is admissible in a court. This is the collection of the evidence. So we're using scientific knowledge. When we analyze, we are putting together the data you have and finding out what sort of picture is revealed. And then the expert report and the expert testimony. So these are the 3 stages of the forensic investigation process. These steps have to be done in a sequential order. So we have to start with collecting the evidence. How we collect the evidence, it will determine whether or not this evidence is admissible in a court of law or not. For example, if we violate the chain of custody, if we do not document the whereabouts of the evidence while we are transporting the evidence, for example, if I have a USB driver, if I have a USB drive or flash memory that was given to me by a police officer, for example, and if I failed to document that in my chain of custody, then I would have violated the chain of custody rules, and this might impact the admissibility of the evidence in a court of law if the case ends up in a court of law. Of course, this is very important. A big principle in forensic investigation is maintaining the chain of custody, which is a document that shows the whereabouts of the evidence from the point of seizure to the point of disposition. Okay, it's very important to keep track of the evidence. Who gave it to you? When did they give it to you? What kind of evidence they gave to you? If it's a USB drive, the size of it, the shape of it, the color of it, the make, the model, all of that, all the details. And then putting together the data you have and finding out what sort of picture is revealed. As a forensic investigator, your job is to tell a story. Your job is to seek the truth and present your findings to either supervisor or a client or a court of law in a neutral manner. We have to be very objective. We cannot be based on our opinions. It's not opinion based. It's not subjective. Everything has to be supported by evidence. If we say that there's a pornography case, for example, or workplace harassment case, or a violation of acceptable use policy in a corporate environment, we have to have evidence to support our statements. If we don't have evidence, concrete evidence, then we would be considered biased or not neutral, and that might impact, again, the admissibility of the evidence. So as experts, forensic investigators or practitioners, we need to be neutral. We need to tell the truth. Our job is to tell a story, seek the truth, and present the findings in a neutral manner. And we have to be objective. Everything we say, it has to be backed up with evidence, concrete evidence. The expert report is a formal document that lists what tests you conducted, what you found, and your conclusions. And then it includes your curriculum vitae or CV. Support every conclusion with at least 2 or 3 reputable references that either agree with that conclusion or provide support for how you came to that conclusion. So again, it's all about backing up your statements with credible references. Must be very thorough, complete, and error-free. How do we ensure that our expert report is error-free? We need to go back to it several times, read and read and read over and over and over again to make sure it's error-free. It doesn't have any grammatical errors, spelling errors. It has to be very thorough. So we do not want to leave out any details, right? In forensic investigations, we say if you have to err on the side of details. So it's better to provide more details rather than omitting details. So there are some rules here about the expert testimony taken from a witness or party to a case before a trial, less formal and is typically held in an attorney's office. That's a deposition. Then we have some of the rules about the expert testimony, such as Rule 703, basis of an expert opinion on ultimate issue, disclosing for the appointed expert witness, and test for relevant evidence. Understanding the field of digital forensics, a person who specializes in digital forensics, they can work for the military, they can work for government, federal agency, they can work for law firms, they can work for criminal prosecutors, academia, data recovery firms, insurance companies, corporations, and even individuals. So what is digital evidence? Again, it's information that has been processed and assembled so that it is relevant to an investigation and supports a specific finding or determination. Again, to determine whether there was sexual harassment in the workplace, to determine whether or not somebody violated acceptable use policy in the work environment. Maybe somebody was downloading illegal material, inappropriate content, unsolicited content, or maybe somebody stole our intellectual property, etc., etc., and must be relevant to a case in order to be evidence. There are different types of evidence. Could be real, documentary, testimonial, or demonstrative. An example of real evidence would be a USB drive. Some of the challenges related to conducting forensic investigations, the volume of data. We could have too much data, terabytes or petabytes of data. Computer systems are complex. We have Windows-based systems, Linux-based systems, Mac-based systems. We have smartphones. We have network devices such as routers, firewalls, switches, IDS, IPS, etc. There are different types of forensic analyses. We can do a forensic analysis on a physical storage media like a USB drive, for example, or email, network, internet, software, live system related to RAM, to the memory, or cell phone or smartphone forensics as well. So these are just some of the domains or subfields of digital forensics. You can specialize in any one of these. General guideline is to maintain the chain of custody, as we mentioned. So a chain of custody, again, is a is a document. It's a formal document that shows the whereabouts of the evidence from the point of seizure to the point of deposition. Do not touch the suspect drive. This is another general principle to avoid tampering with the evidence. Create a document trail to show again the whereabouts, and then secure the evidence in a locker or in a vault in a forensic lab with secure access. For somebody to be successful in conducting forensic investigations, they need to have knowledge of hardware, software, networks, and address. Computer hardware might include the memory, the hard drive, the storage drive, USB drive, DVD, CD, etc. Operating system, as you mentioned, Windows, Linux, Android, Mac OS. So somebody needs to be familiar at least with one of them. As a forensic investigator, you do not need to specialize in every one of these. You can specialize maybe in Windows forensic investigations and maybe have some knowledge of Linux and Mac. It doesn't hurt. But you need to specialize maybe in one area, maybe in email forensics, Windows forensics, Linux forensics, Mac forensics, smartphone forensics, network forensics, internet forensics, live system forensics, etc. We also need to have knowledge of the file system. Files could be any documents, spreadsheet, picture, video, or program. The file system is the physical journaling and the logical journaling. So the file system is a technique that is used by the operating system to manage and organize files on the hardware, on the solid disk drivers, storage media. Network addressing, physical ports, MAC address, IP address, uh, knowledge of the networking principles is required. Knowing what is an IP address, what is a MAC address, what is a URL, etc. These are just some of the networking utilities and commands that you need to be familiar with, such as ipconfig here. If you type ipconfig, it will show you the details of your IP configuration. Ping, this is a very popular, very widely used networking utility or command that you can use to check the connectivity of devices. If you're trying to check the connectivity of a friend's device or a device that you're conducting forensic investigation on, you can use the ping command. Traceroute is another network utility that we can use for networking. We have the obscured information and anti-forensics. So obscured information may be secured by encryption, hidden using steganographic software, compressed, or in a proprietary format. Cyber criminals sometimes obscure information to delete forensic examinations, and companies use certain manipulation and storage techniques to protect business-sensitive information, such as encrypting it. For anti-forensics, attackers may use techniques to intentionally conceal their identities and cover their tracks, of course, and cover their location and behavior, or conceal it. Examples would be data destruction. They could destroy the data so that we cannot find it. They can hide it from us. They can transform it to a different format, or they can alter the file system. All of these are techniques for anti-forensics. The Dover standard is a legal standard set in the 1993 Supreme Court case of Daubert versus Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals, 1993. It's regarding the admissibility or regards the admissibility of expert witnesses' testimony during legal proceedings. Any scientific evidence presented in a trial must have been reviewed and tested by the relevant scientific community. So this is one of the legal standards regarding forensic investigations. We need to be aware of this, of course, as a forensic investigator or professional. It's about empirical testing. So something, let's say if we are using a tool like FTK Imager, that tool must have been empirically tested. It must have been peer reviewed. So other forensic investigators, other forensic experts must have reviewed this and looked at it to make sure it produces valid results. Error rate and standards. What is the error rate of this tool that we are going to use in forensic investigations? Is it 2% or 0.2% or 0.1%, depending on what is acceptable and what is the standard? Generally acceptable theory and technique. So these are just some of the uh, principles that are embedded in the Dauber standard. U.S. laws affecting digital forensics. We have the Federal Privacy Act of 1974, the Privacy Protection Act of 1980, PPA, the Communications Assistance to Law Enforcement Act, unlawful access to stored communications, the Electronic Communications Privacy, the Computer Security Act, and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So these are just some of the laws affecting digital forensics. This is only in the US. The Child Protection and Sexual Predator Punishment Act of 1998, the Children Online Privacy Protection Act of 1998, the Telecommunication Act, the Wireless Communications and Public Safety Act, the US Patriot Act, and we also have fraud and related activity in connection with computers, fraud and related activity in connection with access devices, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and identity theft and aggravated identity theft, sexual exploitation of children, and the list goes on and on. Child Protection and Wireless Act, the Child Protection and Sexual Predator Punishment Act of 1998 requires service providers that become aware of the storage or transmission of child pornography to report it to law enforcement. This is a law. Okay, and this brings us to the end of this keynote speech. Thank you.